I'm on live with Michael Friedman, and so I'm going to see if I can get us both here on continue. Okay, I'm going live right now. All right, I'm still connecting on Substack, so just bear with me, Michael.
All right, and I'm experimenting with getting into something, into StreamYard.
Yeah, it didn't, I didn't send it to you for StreamYard, so don't worry about that. It's still connecting for me on StreamYard.
I was just have a thing here on the screen that says join the chat, so I thought I would be a joiner and join the chat, but it won't let me do that. So
Oh, it won't? That's crazy.
it says it doesn't recognize my YouTube account.
Oh, weird. Okay. All right, here we go. Now it looks like I'm still connecting on Substack. We'll see if it ends up working. But here we are on YouTube as well. So for those of you who've not been on with us before, I'm on today with Michael Friedman, and we both write for Substack. And if you don't know what Substack is, it's a kind of a new journalistic page. It's been around for a while, but it's really catching on. And it's where people can write about all kinds of things that they're an expert in. You can even find people who are just doing it, writing there because they enjoy it. But you find a lot of journalists on there and other people. And Michael and I reconnected after being in touch for decades. And we lost touch for about 10 years. And then he saw my writing on Substack. I saw his, and we reconnected. And we decided we wanted to talk again because we have a lot to say. We met years ago when I was the president of the State Society on Aging, and Michael was the CEO of the Geriatric Mental Health Alliance. He was the founder of that organization, which has gone on to make incredible, amazing changes for mental health for older adults. So we both are passionate about aging, and I happen to write about midlife, and I'm a midlifer. And Michael writes about old age, and he's in his 80s. So we have different perspectives on a lot of different things, but we also have a lot of similarities in how we think about things as well. So for those of you who are just joining on today, Michael and I are really excited to talk today about things that have been really affecting Michael. We've been talking about grief, and Michael lost his wife not that long ago. And so many people write about grief, they talk about grief, but he actually is living with it. He's written about it, he's talked about it, but he's living it also. And so I really want to welcome Michael back in today. We've been joining each other every single week, talking about loneliness, talking about mental health, and now we're going to talk about grief. So, Michael, thanks for being here.
Good to see you again. Always good to have these conversations. And yes, you're right. I am living with grief, and we'll see what happens as I talk about grief today. So if I suddenly burst into tears, that's one of the things that happens.
Yeah, it is. I didn't, that you know how people have said that before, but until you face it, you don't understand how it just comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You could just be sitting there feeling like not okay, but just feeling like everything's normal, and then all of a sudden there are tears that spring from your eyes, like you would see in a cartoon character where the water just falls, sprays out of your eyes. And it's so unexpected. So you're feeling that today?
I've been this has been a tough day for me. This just happens, from time to time when I'm not, as you said, it seems to come from out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I'm entirely certain that the variation in experience I have, that's a cumbersome way of saying it, is part of the grief moves in waves of some sort.
Yeah.
You can be feeling fine, and then all of a sudden, as you say, not from anything that provokes it, obviously, but all of a sudden you can, all of a sudden I can miss my wife, and then be distressed, or just have a different. I want to talk about this today, because I think that the feelings of grief are not as simple as they are sometimes talked about.
Yeah.
Maybe we should get to that. But one of the points that I will make is that grief is not just feeling. It's a change in what I'm calling your state of being.
Yeah.
Um,
Ta-
so
Talk about that, because I don't know that
let's
people.
go, let's go back a step
Yeah.
before we jump to that. I may have said this to you before, but I think that the word grief hides more than it reveals. Um, grief is a nice soft word, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Grief, right? Well, the experience is really hard. It's not soft at all. And grief is a nice short word. Grief. What's up with Michael? Oh, he's in grief. What do we know now?
Right.
And grief is not a short experience. It goes on and on. And there are people who say that if it lasts longer than a year, then it's complicated grief. But
Right.
you don't just grieve for 7 days and then poof, you're just okay.
No,
Grief
you're
goes
right.
on, and it comes and goes, and it happens in unexpected ways, at unexpected times. Uh, I think you correct me if I'm wrong. I think that when people think about grief, what first comes to mind is sadness.
Yeah. People think of sadness when you say the word grief. But it's an abstract thing. When a person hears the word sad, you can't pinpoint exactly what that is, just like grief. It's an abstract idea in our mind. And so that's what makes it pretty difficult.
But also, we use sadness in other circumstances. So,
Yeah.
my granddaughter plays soccer. When her soccer team loses, we're sad.
Yeah.
Well, that's not like grief.
No.
There's all sorts of things that we get sad about, and it's just it doesn't go very deep. But when
Right.
we talk about the so-called sadness of grief, we're talking about something that goes really deep. There's some writers who choose to use the word sorrow instead of the word sad.
Hmm.
That sorrow is sort of deeper than sad, right? Um, I sometimes think about Duke Ellington. Uh, there's a song called Mood Indigo. It
Yeah.
goes, you ain't been blue till you felt that mood indigo.
Yeah.
A really deep blue, but it's an important way of saying that sadness can be sort of superficial. I'm
Right.
feeling good today, or it can really be something quite profound. Uh, I find, and you've confirmed it for you as well, that the sadness of grief is heavily connected with cheerfulness.
Yes,
I'll,
it
I'll,
is.
I've said this before, but it's worth saying again. I'll be sitting in my bedroom watching television, which is where I watch television, and all of a sudden I'll start to cry.
Yeah.
Tears will well up. sometimes from out of nowhere. Sometimes, we have talked about this before, there's a kind of sentimentality. So, the kinds of simple sentiments that evoke tearfulness when you watch a Hallmark movie, for example.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I find all sorts of things will happen, and suddenly I'll feel tearful. And I
Do
think
you, do you feel like this also though? With grief, I found that tearfulness was something that didn't even have to be provoked by sentiment.
exactly.
I found that, I mean, in the case of me, when I was experiencing grief, I was walking through a Walmart. I needed to get a plug for my phone. My phone was running out of energy, and I needed to ask someone where the plugs were for the phones. And all of a sudden, I'm speaking as I am now, but it was like waterworks pouring from my eyes. I had
Yeah.
no control over it. And I don't think that anybody talks about that. They talk about it in a way as though you have control over it, or that as long as there isn't something sentimental that's brought up, you're going to be fine and you won't have that tearfulness. But it can crop up out of nowhere.
Yes. I think that's exactly right. Um, I don't know what to, I don't know why it happens, but I think it's very important to understand that when a person is in grief, it's not just that they're feeling sad. It's not just that they're missing the person who they cared about and who has now died. It's much more. It's deeper. It's more intense. It's more overwhelming.
I think that you're right with all of that. And the only way that I can think of it is, when you're sad, say you lose a game or something like that's more superficial. You feel it, it's sad. But I think that because there's such depth with grief, it's much deeper. That's why it can just pop out at any time, because it's deep inside you. It's not going away. It's not superficial. It doesn't you know dissolve or dissipate. It stays down deep, and every now and then you can try to keep it down, but it's gonna come out. And that's why I think that happens. I don't know if that I spoke clearly about that, but it's something that's much more primal in us than just sadness.
I also think that we say, I think everybody understands that a person like me who has lost a spouse or a life partner, or can, can be others, uh, that we miss the person who we've lost. But I think there's another dimension to it, and that is that it's not just the person that's been lost, it's the relationship.
Yeah.
And I believe, and I don't see this talked about in the psychological literature. I believe that there is a kind of metaphysical, if I can use that word, a metaphysical change that takes place in long relationships, in
Mhm.
which the relationship becomes its own reality. It's not just two people who are living every day together, and so they have lots of things in common. That's true. That's important. That's something that we miss. But there's also this other thing that gets created in the course of a long relationship that is above and beyond the day to day connection between two people. And that part of grief has to do with the loss of that. That's obliterated,
Yeah.
that's shattered. You can find various words for it. But I think of it as a kind of shattering of reality that takes place, and it's not just I miss my wife. It's
I agree with you. And that was a good way to put it, sort of a metaphysical loss, because it is deeper than just, missing somebody. You're right about that. It is a part of your reality is gone. A part
yes,
you just lost a whole section of your reality. And in the case of you who lived with your wife for more than 40 years, that is that's a big part of your reality. If a person loses a child, if they lose a spouse, if they lose anybody that they've had in their life for no matter what amount of time that is, you lose that reality. And I don't think you're right. People don't talk about that. That's not really written about very at all. I haven't seen that in the psychology literature, but that is really what is happening. And that loss is bigger than sadness, like you would have if you lose a game or if you
and it's bigger than just missing somebody.
absolutely 100%. Grief is deep. And I think that people don't understand it, so they get uncomfortable when they don't know how to act around somebody who is grieving. And then when they're suffering from grief, it isn't something they expect. Um, it's really treated as a superficial thing, and that you'll just get over it in a year.
I think that's right. So I think there are many things to say about the complexities of grief. I say complexities of grief. I just want to be clear. When I say that, I'm not talking about what's called complicated grief. So it may be worthwhile just taking a second to say that in the literature, there are three sorts of grief that get identified. One is acute grief, which is what I think we should talk about today. The other is integrated grief, and that's a very hopeful thing. That is, you've somehow moved along in your life and gotten to a point where it's not that grief is gone, grief may never be gone, but it is integrated into the life that you're now living with some degree of a considerable degree of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And then the third form of grief that they talk about in the literature is complicated grief, which is essentially acute grief that doesn't turn into integrated grief, and in that sense doesn't go away. So that's a whole separate topic. But the initial phase, if we think of this as something that evolves over time, the initial phase is acute grief. And again, I think it's very important to understand not only it's not something as superficial as sadness, it's something much deeper than that. It's not something that can be described as, oh, I miss my wife. It goes much deeper than that. And I think it has to do with the loss of this relationship, this powerful thing that's been created. There's Catherine Shear, who works a lot on the topic of complicated grief, but also grief in general. And she talks about what I call this metaphysical level as the attachment. And she casts all of this in terms of attachment theory.
Yeah.
I frankly like my way of approaching this better, to say there's a metaphysical change that takes place when you have a long and a loving relationship. But I think it's also very important to point out that grief involves a lot of different emotions, which I think we should try to talk some about.
Mhm.
It also involves physical changes.
Oh, talk about well, we'll talk about the physical changes that you're talking about as well.
So, uh, for example, it is very common for people who are experiencing grief to sleep very poorly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
it is also, I want to come back to that.
Sleeping poorly is
I'm going to do
definitely,
that right now, and it's a killer.
yeah,
It really
yeah.
is. It really is hard. Uh, uh, in addition to that, there is a tendency which is not fully explained for people to develop illnesses which at their extreme kill them. There's something in the literature called the widowhood effect.
Yep.
And the data on that have to do with how soon after the death of a spouse do the survivors die.
It's
And it's quite remarkable that people who have lost a life's partner are increasingly likely to die sooner than they otherwise would be expected to die.
Absolutely.
Something physical that goes on with that. There's also an almost physical sense, or a physical sense of unsteadiness. It's similar to anxiety, a kind of physical agitation that many people experience. That's it is a physical sensation. Now, anxiety, the psychological anxiety, is also a physical sensation, but there's something happening physically.
Well, it makes sense because your physical reality has changed. I mean, that goes with that. You're going to feel anxiety. You're going to feel agitated. You're going to feel off. Your physical reality has changed.
There is some indication, and I'm not a scientist, so but there is some indication that there are increased levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and increased levels of adrenaline. So I'm not sure what that's about, but it is perfectly possible that contributes to sleeplessness, for example. If your adrenaline is really pumping, it's not so easy to go to sleep. And if cortisol is high and your body is experiencing stress, also not so easy to sleep. So those are some of the physical consequences of it.
Anytime you have an emotional change, which grief is, right? You are going to have physical things that happen as well. So if you're depressed, you may have digestive issues, you may have, sleep issues, you may have other physical issues. So our emotions are tied to our physical beings as well. And, I'm glad that we're talking about this because, I write about midlife and aging and you write about old age, but this starts to really affect people by the time you hit midlife. People start to lose individuals in their life and are affected by grief, and not many people talk openly about it. And it hits people like they are hitting a brick wall. No one's talked about it. They're all of a sudden feeling it and experiencing it, and no one prepared them for this. And not like there's, even if you're prepared, it's helpful and in complete ways, but it's nice to at least know that it's not. When people say, oh, you're experiencing grief, it makes it sound like there's some kind of normal easiness to it, and there isn't.
I think that's absolutely right, that we use this concept of grief, that we use, how come Michael doesn't seem like himself lately? Oh, his wife died and he's in grief. Well, what does that mean? So I think we should talk some about that. I mean, I think that there are a whole range of emotions that are involved in the experience of grief that are quite powerful. And again, you were making the point that it's very difficult to talk to people about that. People don't want to hear it.
No.
They don't want to hear it. I understand that. I mean, this death is unpleasant. Maybe I should repeat that. Death is unpleasant. I say that with a smile on my face. I mean, it's sort of obvious, but it's very tough for people to listen to it. Uh,
It is, but that's one of the things that's needed. I remember when I was going through grief and I was talking with people about it, and I knew, I bet they are really not wishing I would talk about this, but I needed to. And so there's this sort of tug where you can sense that people are trying to be polite and nice and say, "How are you?" but they don't want you to answer and say how you're really feeling and thinking. And
you're absolutely right.
that's there's that's happening. And I remember telling people how I felt and knowing that they were probably feeling like, gee, I wish she wasn't telling me, but I needed to. I really needed to. So um all I'll say is I hope people do talk to people because, if we all know that that's needed, sometimes people need to just process it, get it out, talk about it, and they
Well,
just need an ear.
I think talking about it is very important,
It
and
is.
I think we said this when we were talking about loneliness. It's certainly in the piece that I wrote about loneliness, and that is that it's not only important to be able to talk about it, but it's important for people to listen without telling you how to make your life better.
Oh, yes. That's so true. Nobody wants advice on how it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Here's what you do to make your life better. No one wants that.
Yeah, there's a very nice man who has now written to me twice in response to my blog posts, and the first time he essentially yelled at me and said, "Well, if you only exercised and ate better, you would be doing fine," which is one of my favorite forms of advice. But this time he wrote to me and he said, "Look, what you really need to do is you need to go on a jazz cruise." Okay, that's
It,
not particularly useful to me, but okay. Okay.
I love it when people are trying, but I will say that when we give that advice, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this myself because, when you don't know what to do, you're just trying to be helpful in some kind of a way. But it's what it does is it adds one more thing that you feel like, oh my gosh, one more thing I have to do or that I have to take control of. And just taking control of a new reality without that person in your life is overwhelming enough. So when you add one more thing that a person should be doing to make their life better, it actually adds to the overwhelm. Um, and but still, it's nice when people reach out. It's nice when people make an effort because some people are too afraid to reach out. They hold back. They may stay away because they don't know what to say or how to act. It's just an awkward time for so many people.
It
Um,
is.
so
It
just
is.
do your best. That like don't judge yourself.
No, I'm glad for compassionate people
Yeah.
who do the best they can to be there, to be there. Uh, I am amazed that on several occasions I've been invited out to dinner or brunch or whatever, uh, and the people who have invited me out never ask me how I'm doing. That I find even more astounding. But I think that they feel it would be better if we don't talk about this because if we talk about it, then he'll just get upset.
Or they have it's a reminder to others that we are mortal. So
Yes,
that's what
indeed.
people are like, I don't want to hear it. It reminds me that, it could be me that's sitting in your seat.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the different emotions that people
Yeah.
experience when they're going through grief. We've already mentioned sadness and said that it's a much deeper thing, and whether to use the word
Grief
sorrow.
is a deeper thing than sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, it's definitely it's a profound form of sadness that is part and parcel of this. we've also mentioned just missing a person.
Mm-hmm.
And while I've said that it's deeper than that, more complicated than that, but that's absolutely part of the experience of whenever it is. I mean, I miss Harriet when I'm having dinner alone. And I
You
want
could tell,
to,
Michael, you said you're missing the reality.
yeah. Well, but it's both missing the person and then missing the marriage
Yeah.
and the relationship. Um, but there's more to it. There are many more emotions that are involved in this. I found uh, early on, particularly, what was particularly striking was what I call emotional turmoil, uh, which by which I mean I was just all over the place emotionally. All sorts of things would set me off. Some of it was remembering Harriet. Some of it was almost anything. I just became emotionally, well, we'll use a technical term, unglued.
Yeah. Well, that's to be
And,
expected.
and I think that's common.
Yeah.
We've talked about loneliness, which I think is a major, major part of grief. And uh, we talked about this the last time we got together, as you know. I think that there are at least two forms of loneliness. There's the kind of loneliness that is the result of being isolated and not being with people. And if you are with people, then you feel less lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another kind of loneliness, which is missing that core relationship that you've had. It's missing the marriage. It's missing all these, uh, missing a person, a marriage at a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and one of the things that's striking about that form of loneliness is that you can be with other people and feel it.
Yeah.
And sometimes being with other people provokes it, right? So that you're in a situation in which, or I'll speak personally, I'm in a situation where I would have been with my wife, and
Yeah.
she's not there, and I'm suddenly really conscious of her not being there, and that uh, where I used to be a couple, I'm now a single person.
Right.
Uh, and I can also at times just watch other people as they continue their lives. And one of the things I feel, and I think other people feel who are widowed, is tremendous discontinuity. My life is not just going on.
Right. Right. You have a new life, a new reality.
I'm in the process of
Yeah.
making a new life, sometimes with happiness,
Yeah.
sometimes with great dismay.
Yes.
Uh,
You're essentially
we could talk
confronting.
about that a whole lot, but I think people who are in grief are often more anxious than they would otherwise be. And what's surprising about that?
There's nothing surprising about that. It's everything's new again.
Well, and in my case, I've had 49 years, pick your number of years, of having a particular life, particular lifestyle,
Mhm.
expectations, and all of a sudden, that's not there.
Right.
It's taken away.
Yeah.
It's been taken away. Uh,
You're
so
you're
that
right.
you
And
begin to feel more anxious about things. It seems to me just makes absolute sense.
anxiety makes sense. Um, all of the feelings that any person would have when they're doing something new, brand new. You have all of those feelings because you're engaging now in a brand new reality. In the
Yeah.
case of you, it's a brand new life that's missing someone you had in it for 49 years. If it's a parent, if it's a child, if it's a spouse, if it's a partner, if it's a close friend, you're engaging in a new reality and whatever that reality was with that person. And of course you're going to feel anxious. We all feel anxious when we're doing something new. Of course you're going to feel waves of grief, that emotion and sadness and tearfulness that come out of nowhere with any of that, because it's brand new. It's a whole new segment of your life that you're adding in. It's very scary too. A lot of people, when they're in grief, they talk about how especially at night it gets really scary because they're left with their thoughts. Everything's turned off, and that can be another thing that people feel a sense of fear, being afraid.
They're also left alone,
Yes.
and being left alone at night when you used to be able to reach across a bed and touch somebody,
Yeah.
or they would reach across the bed and touch you.
Yep.
Uh,
Make a phone call to someone, have a conversation, say, oh, this went well. Oh, what do I do about this? Those little things that we take for granted.
yes, but touching is really important.
Of course it is.
So I think you're absolutely right to focus on the day-to-day conversation. And everybody who I've spoken to who has been widowed says that they really miss that end of the day conversation where not as simple as, well, what did you do today, honey? What did I do today, honey? But there's that takes place, whatever's on your mind, whatever.
Mhm.
And there's that sort of sharing
Yeah.
that is suddenly gone. But the loss of touch is also, I think, something that is terribly important.
Yeah.
I was in grief counseling, which unfortunately is time limited. I'd be happy to still be in grief counseling. But one of the things that my grief counselor said that I found very important is that touch can be and often is more important than sex.
Oh, touch is important for everyone. I mean, there have been studies that have been done with babies who are not touched and how they can become physically ill and really deteriorate. Touch is important to us in every age of our lives. It's incredibly important to us. Like you said, just reaching over and touching someone, that is huge. But knowing that you can't do that is also, that's a big loss. When you talked about grief being much more than just sadness, look at everything that you've mentioned. It's the touch. If you lose a soccer game and you feel sad, you're not, there isn't the same feeling of the loss of touch, the loss of conversation, a fearfulness at night, anxiety about doing new things, a loss of a reality, the reality that you had with that individual, the forming of a new reality to take that place. You have so much there that makes grief a much deeper thing than sadness, that most of us put together and think of as the same thing, but they're just not. And that's why when we run into somebody who's suffering from grief, we don't know how to deal with it because we think of it as much more simple than it really is.
Well, the best thing to do when you're in contact with someone who is in grief is let them talk if they want to talk.
Yeah,
They may not want to.
that's true.
And I think one needs to be selective about who you talk to. So
Oh, talk about that, being selective about who you talk to when you're in group. What do you
I,
think about that?
I meet all sorts of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you? You're out and about in the world, and I would take a ridiculous example. You go to a restaurant and there's somebody who waits on you. You're not going to talk to them about, you're not going to say to
Yeah.
them, do you know that my wife just died?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, and I'm really upset about it. Now, that's a ridiculous example, I understand. But there are all sorts of relationships we have in which there's no reason to believe that somebody would care. It's not the nature of the relationship. Whether it's a commercial relationship like a waiter, which again may be a ridiculous example, but if you work uh, and you have social relationships with people at work, it's not necessarily, I think, appropriate to talk to everybody you know at work and share your feelings about the loss of a person who's important to you. Life goes on, and but there are a lot of people with whom you can have personal conversations.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the point I'm making is that we just don't have real personal conversations with most people that we come across in our lives.
Right.
Uh, Again, to use a ridiculous example, we talk about the weather, we talk about the war in Iran, we talk about the president, we
Yeah.
talk about um, the vacation that we just took. We talk about all sorts of things where we're not necessarily where it just doesn't make sense to say, oh, by the way, I'm also
Look,
really.
if you do, though, it's okay. You know, I think that we all understand in some ways, though, also, if somebody says that, that might be that moment that they just need something.
Yeah.
So it's okay. I think that uh, th- I think that there are so many ways in which people, you can get hit with overwhelming emotions all of a sudden, and you just need to tell somebody. If it's your waiter, go ahead. It's not going to ruin that person's life. Um, but yes, you're right. Well, I think that one of the biggest things is that um, we do need to talk to people. And if you can find people that you can talk to that you know well enough, or that can listen, or that are there for you. You joined a grief counseling. You were able to talk to me about the loss of Harriet. And I wanted to hear and I wanted to listen. And we hadn't been in touch for like 10 years. So there are people there that, you might think, gee, I haven't talked to this person in a while. And that might be a person that is just the right person to talk to about it. Um, so,
And
but
sometimes it can just be a random person, and
that's
and
true.
just a brief sort of acknowledgement and a brief sense of caring and a brief sense of sympathy.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is having a sense of somebody caring,
Yes, absolutely.
however that happens.
I still remember those who cared. I don't remember everything people said, but I remember when people cared, and I actually still remember that it was so
Yeah.
meaningful. And a lot of people feel like I don't know how I can show that I care. And so it isn't your words, it's you listening. I really remember that. That was
Listening, and yes, the feeling comes across.
it does, really does.
So a few other emotions. Again, the point that I'm making is that grief is not a simple emotion. It's not a singular emotion. It's a combination of rather powerful emotions, and a few others that I should mention before we. I'll just run through them quickly, and then we
Yeah,
can
please.
put whatever you want. One of them is anger.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so maybe we can come back to that. Another is a sense of abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Now these are sort of irrational, right? Harriet didn't abandon me, but I feel abandoned.
Yeah.
That contributes to ongoing anxiety too. Uh, I talked just the other day with a man who is not quite as old as I, who's also a widower. And he's been reading my blog, and he said, you haven't mentioned the loss of trust.
Oh,
And I thought that was a really important observation at two levels. One is particularly in long relationships, not all of them, I'll come back to that, but in a lot of very long relationships, there's a kind of trust that develops between the two people who were involved. Uh, they trust each other.
yeah.
Now, that's not always the case because, in fact, there are life partners who aren't trustworthy.
That's true.
And there's violation of trust in marriages apparently quite frequently. Uh, but there is a kind of trust that develops in long, good relationships uh, that gets lost, and that just not to have somebody who have that kind of trust in is a loss.
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, I think that it shakes a kind of trust that you have in the order of your world.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, so it's not just the loss of the person, and it's not just the loss of that relationship. It's that your place in the world has somehow changed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Um, that contributes to a loss of confidence. It contributes to a loss of hope. Um, and very importantly, as somebody pointed out to me recently, it creates vulnerability.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
people in grief generally just feel vulnerable.
Of course they do. Yeah.
Been abandoned. Uh, they've they trusted that something was going to be. Uh, it's perfectly obvious, as I've said repeatedly and wrote in the last blog, and if not in other ones as well. Every marriage that doesn't end in divorce ends in widowhood.
That's true.
And, Deborah, I'm sorry to tell you, but at some point, either you or your husband is going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way it is.
You're
But
right.
it's not the way you experience life, is it?
No. There's one other thing that you didn't mention that I think should be mentioned, and that's relief. A lot of people who live with someone who had a long-term illness, or that had a parent or a spouse or significant other, or there could be relief in whatever way it is. And that is something that people don't talk about because there's a lot of guilt associated with that.
Well,
That's very normal.
I have notes in front of me, Deborah, and the next thing on the list was relief.
We're in sync.
And we're in sync. We're in sync. Absolutely right. Listen, uh, being a caregiver to somebody who's dying is very hard.
It is, yeah.
So there is this thing, I'll call it. I call it grief before death. It's sometimes called anticipatory grief. And I don't know, somebody I read recently called it pre-death grief. I like it. The fact of the matter is that grief begins during the dying process.
Yes, you're right. It does. If there's a long-term illness, yes.
It is the emotional pain that we're talking about after a person has died begins in the case of people who have protracted periods of dying. these emotions all begin beforehand.
Yeah, you're right.
And there's also a change in the relationship that takes place when people who are dying. Uh, there are some people who say that their love for each other became more intense during this period where one of them was dying and the other was a caregiver. And there are others of it who don't feel that at all,
Right.
and who feel now more that they're acting from obligation than from affection. Camus, who I like to quote on this, said that love is an always unique combination of affection and obligation.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
and so for some people, the affection apparently grows during the time when people are dying, which uh, and for some people, affection diminishes and the feeling of obligation increases.
Yeah.
Um, as I've thought about it, it seemed to me that there's a kind of intense caring that exists before the process of death begins and that gets intensified during the time that somebody is dying. But back to your point, and that is being a caregiver and living with somebody who is dying and being close with somebody who's dying, holding somebody as they die.
Yeah.
These are hard experiences. And when it's over, I think probably everybody feels some relief, even in the most loving relationships.
Yeah. The relief of not having to have the
And,
caregiver
and, and
obligation. Yeah.
in reality, not all relationships, long relationships, are loving.
That's true.
So,
The other thing is that you may think you're going to feel one way and you might feel the other. So some people, when they're going through, when they're caregiving or when someone is passing or when somebody passes, they think they're going to feel one way and they think they feel another. So
yeah,
sometimes people feel relief and they weren't expecting that. Sometimes people feel anger, they weren't expecting that. They have unexpected feelings because they anticipated they would feel one way. And then that is that's a hardship when you end up saying, gee, why do I feel this way? I didn't expect that. That people put judgments on themselves for feeling a certain way. And that's not a great thing, but people can't help that. They can't anticipate how they're going to feel.
I think particularly anger is important to understand as a consequence of dying and of death. So I confess that there are nights when I loudly curse the universe uh, because I'm really angry about what happened. But there are also have been times when I'm angry with Harriet.
Mhm.
How could she do this to me? How could she abandon me like this? How could she put me through this? And where the hell is she? Early on in the process, I would get up in the middle of the night for the obvious old man reasons and, and, and walk past her side of the bed. And I would say to her, Harriet, you've been dead long enough. Cut it out.
Yeah,
Not rational.
but understandable.
Yeah. But I think, and also it just reminds me that one of the characteristics, and this is a dangerous one, of grief is becoming irrational. So the advice that's usually given is don't make any major decisions for at least a year. That's
Yeah, that's true. That's
probably
very,
still good advice.
yeah.
I confess that I have done a few things that were really stupid in the course of all of this. Uh, you know, the mind fills with strange ideas,
That's true.
and that's I think inevitable. Uh, but I think it's also something to be careful of if you can.
I think it's also important for those around someone who's it's very hard to do that for yourself. But if you know someone who's grieving, it's a time for you to step in and really try to help that person if you see them making decisions that they shouldn't be making, or to help them say, hey, why are you thinking about that, making that decision? Because that's usually when people step back and they're not there for somebody, and so somebody's out making decisions that aren't the best for them. But that's the time to step in as a good friend or as a family member to say, hey, um, you know, don't make any rash decisions right now.
So the question we should touch on is what can be done to get through grief,
Yeah.
and I think the answers that are usually given are pretty much on target and
Yeah.
much easier said than done, and not entirely effective. But one answer that's given is that if you're in grief, you should avoid isolation.
Right.
That is to say, you should spend time with other people. I just read something by a researcher on grief by the name of Catherine Shear, and she said that it's important to have a companion in grief. Now, I'm not entirely sure what she means by that. I'll have
I
to,
haven't heard that before, but I'm intrigued.
yeah. So I
Companion
don't,
grief. What does that mean? Is that someone that you're talking with, or what does that person?
yeah, I don't know if she's suggesting that you should rapidly form a very close and loving relationship with somebody else, or whether you just need somebody who's there for you, and who will listen to you and who you can share feelings with. I do think this, again, I'm not sure what she means, but as I've said over and over again, the loneliness takes two forms. There's the loneliness that you can deal with by being with other people and just having a nice social interchange. And so when we say that people in grief should avoid isolation, that's that.
Yeah.
But there is this deep emotional longing to have closeness, dare I say love, with another person that is not addressed just by being with other people.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's more to it than just being with other people, but it is very important not to lock yourself up in your apartment because you're feeling really terrible.
Right.
You gotta be in touch with people, family, friends, whatever. Staying active is a second observation that people make, and doing things that you enjoy doing.
Even if you're not enjoying them.
Do them anyway.
Yeah.
You got to do something.
Yeah.
You can't just let yourself sit around uh, just feeling terrible. You got to do something. Now, what people add to that is that there's a search for new meaning that is important. There's the loss of somebody who you love deeply uh, is a loss of meaning.
Yeah.
That's hard to explain, I think, but
It's part of the loss of the reality
no, it's a
that
loss
goes
of
with
the
the
yeah,
loss of meaning. Yeah.
and this gives my life meaning.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things that people talk about is the importance not just of staying active, but of trying to find things that to do that give your life. People most often in the West, or in Western psychology anyway, talk about purpose. As I think I've said to you before, I think purpose is one form of meaning, but not the only. But having things to do that give you a sense of this is worth doing.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's important. I think that for many people, in finding meaning, what is important is something transcendent.
Right.
Now, I guess I've said this before. I talk about it often in terms of my creative efforts, photography and jazz in my case. And I think that artistic efforts, creative efforts, provide an opportunity to have this sense of a transcendent reality that you connect with. And of course, a lot of people find it through religion.
Yes. And
And so
spirituality.
there are people who are involved as grief counselors who urge their clients to connect with religion. I would not do that. I don't know about you. I would urge.
Spirituality is another thing that people try to have people connect with, because that's much more accessible to individuals who maybe didn't feel religious or who don't want to, um, go down with the rituals that they had with regard to religion, but they feel comfortable with spirituality.
Say that again.
Spirituality can be much
Yeah,
more.
spirituality.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people, like the first book that I wrote was about spirituality at the end of life. And a lot of people will engage in spirituality versus religiosity at the end of life. It's much more accessible. It's much more, a lot of people will find more meaning in that. Um,
But a spiritual experience is very important, however you get access to it.
right.
And then we're running out of time. Just quickly to say, grief counseling helps. That
Yeah.
depends, of course, on the grief counselor and
Yeah, that's true.
other things. But I found grief counseling very helpful. And for many people, support groups help.
Hmm.
Uh, and I, I'm not a joiner, so support groups didn't have any appeal to me. And I think it's important to say that support groups aren't for everybody.
Yeah. But grief
But for a
counseling.
lot of people,
Yeah.
they really are very helpful.
Yeah.
So to people who are living through grief at this point, I would say if you're not getting grief counseling, you should get it.
Oh, absolutely. Grief counseling is something that, so much, I haven't heard anybody who didn't feel like they benefited from grief counseling. Um, it's just, it's like just what people need, because you do need to talk about it. And sometimes people don't feel like they can talk about it with, the people at work, like you said, or the waiter, so it's a good place to go. I'm glad we got to talk today. I know it
You?
was a hard day for you, and I feel for you. So,
Well, thank you. It's the process of grief, as I am learning, is difficult and it's up and down.
yeah,
And as I told you before we went on the air, I got hit hard today. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry you got hit hard today. I hope tomorrow is an easier day for you.
me too. Thank you very much.
And thank you. We'll see everybody again next week at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be talking about something that,
Daylight saving time.
oh yeah, daylight savings time, but for Eastern as well. But so we'll see you all next week at the same time. And hopefully we'll have Michael on Substack so that you can see him. Anyway, it was lovely seeing you today.
Good to see you.